The Prime Minister here is really stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, he's getting health advice from people like that Chief Science Officer you heard there in Best Package. They're saying to just go a little bit easy on relaxing these measures. On the other hand, his backbench is getting very restless. Business groups are quite keen to see more parts of the economy open, and so inevitably he has to make a decision, and he has made one today. He said he wants to try and get the country back to some normality by Christmas, and that from August 1st the government will no longer be recommending people work from home. Instead, they will give employers more discretion to allow people to come back into the office and other workplaces that have, of course, been pretty well empty over the past few months. But he does have a long road ahead of him in terms of the economy. We know that 650,000 jobs have been lost across the UK as a result of coronavirus, and the number of people that have applied for what we would call Centrelink, it has doubled in the past 3 months to a normal period. So a lot of employment experts and business groups here are quite worried that there could be a significant unemployment landslide on the way. We always knew this health crisis was going to be serious from a health perspective, but we are starting to feel more and more that economic impact.
We certainly are. And getting back to the health impact, the UK's Health Minister, Matt Hancock, he called for an urgent review into how coronavirus deaths have been recorded in England. He actually said while the NHS currently reports 30 to 35 deaths per day, Public Health England data often shows double that or more.
Yeah, well, where it gets quite confusing is that we do get these daily announcements with the number of deaths. I mean, just today, 114 is the figure, but then about 2 weeks later, you get more official statistics from the Office of National Statistics, and they often include people that may have died in their home or have died away from a health facility, and it becomes very, very complicated. Making things even more complex is that, of course, the UK is broken down between England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. They all have different ways of reporting their coronavirus numbers. So there are concerns that there has been an undercount in the total death toll in the UK. We know the official one is just over 45,000, streets ahead of the rest of Europe, just behind the United States, which you know is also being very severely impacted by this disease. But there's already talks of some form of independent inquiry in coming months or years to work out what went wrong in the UK in terms of why it was so badly affected and whether that counting was done correctly.
Trent, English cricketer Jofra Archer has been dropped from the second test against the West Indies for breaching strict coronavirus protocols.
Yeah, he's copped a pretty strong rap over the knuckles from team bosses over here. They said he put tens of millions of pounds at risk and almost brought the summer of cricket to an end. Now, to understand this, you just have to take a step back a little bit. Cricket authorities here had set up what they were calling a biosecure series. It had some 72 pages worth of protocols that players had to fill in order to make sure that they stayed within a bubble and that the risk of an infection spreading between teams and team officials was low. Well, as part of that protocol, all the players had to drive themselves to each match. Now, Jofra, as you mentioned, he took a bit of a detour, and instead of driving straight to the stadium for the second test, he headed to his home for a little bit in Brighton. Team officials found that out, and he's now found himself stuck in a hotel room for 5 days under quarantine. He will miss the second test, and there could be further disciplinary action on the way. You know, in ordinary times, quickly ducking home to check on the dog and the like is not something you would get in trouble for. But of course, during COVID-19, we have to follow these protocols pretty strictly to ensure that the infection doesn't spread.
Yeah, we certainly do. Let's get back to the budget. The UK Office for Budget Responsibility says the economy is on track to shrink by 12.4% this year. That's marking the biggest economic decline in 300 years. How is the government responding?
Well, the government has still got its furlough scheme in place. It's paying the wages of around 9 million Brits. But that scheme will come to an end in October. And from August, employers are going to have to start contributing more to that scheme. So there is a fear that some of those workers will inevitably laid off. There's a lot of questions around what will happen at that cliff edge moment in October. As I said earlier, applications for universal credit have doubled. They're at 2.6 million. Now, a lot of economists here think that hiding behind some of those numbers is even a worse outcome that may be to come. In the background of all of that, to make things even more complicated, Brexit negotiations are still ongoing, and it is looking more and more likely that the UK may leave the European Union without a deal come December. So between, you've kind of got a double whammy, if you will. On one hand, you've got the coronavirus hitting the economy very hard here, and then you'll have this major economic shock if the UK does leave the EU without a deal. So I said earlier, Boris Johnson was stuck between a rock and a hard place, and when it comes to the economy, it's not just him, but his entire government, I think, it's a pretty bleak picture at the moment for the economic outlook.
Yeah, it certainly is. And finally, Trent, correspondence between the Queen's Secretary and former Governor-General Sir John Kerr have finally been released after 45 years. What's been the reaction?
Yeah, well, I have to say the reaction over here, I mean, it hasn't been that big. I mean, presumably the coronavirus and the lifting of lockdowns has really taken a lot of the news agenda, but nevertheless, it has been over here. We know that this was a bit of an ugly episode in the Queen's reign, as something that the royal family and Buckingham Palace likes to try and move on from. But nevertheless, these documents have been released. She did put out a statement, or the palace did, I should say, earlier in the week, saying throughout her reign, Her Majesty has consistently demonstrated support for Australia, the primacy of its constitution and the independence of the Australian people. I suspect the Queen and Buckingham Palace will be hoping to see the back of this affair quite quickly and be able to move on from it.